Thank you, Senator Reid. Thank you, gentlemen, for your service to this country. And I especially want to thank you, General Dempsey, for the many, many years that you have served the people of this country and the military families that have been under you. Thank you, sir. Mr. Carter, earlier, Senator Rounds had a conversation with General Dempsey about the act of patience and time, and I know the General's counseled patience, and he has discussed time. What role do you see time playing in our strategy? You know, do we have a strategy on forces, on containing ISIL? Are we going to allow them to be able to maintain control of territory for the next 3 to 5 years? Is that going to be acceptable to us? And do you see risks with that type of strategy?
Well, I think we're going to continue to strike and apply pressure to ISIL throughout this period. We're doing it now. We do it every day. It's had some effect. And we're going to continue every single day, as we did over this past weekend, to defend ourselves against ISIL, including these homegrown people. All that will go on and has to go on because we have to protect ourselves in the meantime. What takes the time, and I think this is what the chairman was getting at, what takes the time is, and this is just in the nature of things, getting a lasting result. A lasting result is one where not only is ISIL defeated, but they stay defeated. And in order for them to stay defeated, there has to be somebody on that territory who is keeping the peace and governing and replacing the ISIL in the territory. And that takes some time. We see ourselves, we're working with the Kurds to do that. We're working with Sunni tribes, but that's in the nature of things. We want that to go as quickly as possible. And we're hastening that to the best of our ability, as are other members of the coalition. But that is the thing that takes the time to build. But in the meantime, we have to protect ourselves, and we have to keep pressure on ISIL, and we'll be doing that constantly.
I agree with you on that, but as General,
would you mind? I'd like to, because I've thought about this a lot. Your question is really whether patience increases risk. That's really your question. And I think patience probably does increase risk to the mission somewhat because it extends the time when other things could happen, right? But I think were we to take more responsibility directly and unilaterally, that would certainly increase risk in another way. It increases risk to our force and increases risk to the other missions that we're held accountable to accomplish globally. What I get paid for is to give advice to the Secretary of Defense with the JCS and the President on managing risk. So to your question, does risk increase due to patience? Of course. But the alternative increases risk in other ways, and it's our job to manage that risk.
As you look at managing that risk and you look at balancing it, how do you reach a decision where you can maintain that patience when you know that when ISIL controls that territory that they have now and they continue to advance in other areas, whether it would be in the region or in Russia, that is a recruitment item for them, that it will inspire attacks, whether it's in that region or elsewhere around the world. How do you balance that and have the risk that we face in our homeland continue, what I think would be continue to grow because of possibly an overabundance of patience?
Yeah, I'll keep at it because, as I said, this is the issue on which the campaign turns, correctly? Or correct? So what you have to be assured of is that as we manage risk, we look at those things which could threaten U.S. persons and facilities around the globe and the homeland. And where we see risk accruing that could have threatened that national security interest, there's no hesitance for us to act unilaterally and decisively. On the other hand, this campaign is built on the premise that it relies upon other actors. That necessarily requires a degree of patience that we need to nurture, we need to reinforce, and we need to understand in the context of the other things we're trying to accomplish, not only in the Middle East, but globally. So if you're suggesting that ISIL's threat to the homeland could increase because of this patience, I concede that risk. We take on board the responsibility to manage it. But I would also suggest to you that we would contribute mightily to ISIL's message as a movement were we to confront them directly on the ground in Iraq and Syria.
If we look at patience, if we look at restraint, don't you think that with our restraint, we're in many ways encouraging the Iraqis to look elsewhere and to especially look to Iran and invite them into Iraq where they are, because they know that that Iran will be there fighting a common enemy that they both face at this point? Aren't we opening that door to Iran with this what I kind of view as an overabundance of patience, which to me is the greatest risk?
Yeah, look, when you look at what we're doing, we're trying to, by the way, the government of Iran has been reaching out to Iran since roughly 2004, and they have probably increased their outreach to Iran, but it has very little to do with what we're doing or not doing. It has everything to do with the fact that they believe that their future is, that it's their turn, and that their particular form of governance, which is not yet inclusive as it needs to be, is the right form of governance. So they were going to do this whether we're there or not, and whatever manner in which we exert our influence.
So they have boots on the ground in Iraq through no action of the United States or inaction by the United States.
I would say that they're the advisors that have been sent, the ISR that they're flying, and some of the other capabilities they provided to the government of Iraq. I would agree with you that they would have provided that whether we were there.
It was a question, it wasn't a statement on my part.
The answer is yeah, they would have been there regardless of our actions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.